stopped doing every favor for my ex after he refused the one favor I asked. Now he's struggling more than ever. My name is Claire. I'm 30 years old, and my ex-husband Greg is 38. We share two wonderful kids, Louisa, who's 9, and Ted, who's 7. More than 5 years ago, Greg and I decided to end our marriage. It wasn't acrimonious, just a realization that we wanted different things. He longed for more children, while I was content with our two. Even therapy couldn't bridge that divide. Remarkably, we've remained fantastic co-parents since then. There are no custody fights, no bitterness, and, since we split everything 50-50, neither of us pays child support. If one of us needs a switch for work or an emergency, it's always a given that the other will step up. For us, it's always about making sure Louisa and Ted have stability above all else. A year after the divorce, Greg married Tessie, also 38, and pretty soon they had a baby boy together. Now, they're expecting another little one any week. My life moved on too. I'm engaged to Luke, who's 36. We've been together 3 years and he's been a part of my children's lives for at least 2. We even moved in together last year. I wouldn't call us all best friends or anything, but we keep things civil and cheerful. There's a group chat for all major kid logistics, but it never gets personal or messy. We even had a rule that both new partners get introduced to the kids and ex-spouse before spending time together, and those moments were surprisingly smooth. Somehow, we found a lovely groove with this blended family situation. When Greg married Tessie, I took Louisa and Ted an extra week during their honeymoon, followed it up with my usual week to give them some breathing room. When their first baby arrived, I kept the kids with me for about a month so Tessie and Greg could settle in as new parents. Of course, I brought them over regularly to meet their baby brother. It was too exciting to keep them away. A few weeks ago, I bumped into Tessie at Louisa's soccer game where she mentioned the date for her C-section, right in the middle of their custody week. I was genuinely thrilled for them and offered, without hesitation, to keep Louisa and Ted for that week and even my next one, so things could settle down for them. Tessie seemed relieved, but then hesitated and sheepishly asked if I could keep them for yet another week, just like after their first baby, giving them a full month to acclimate. I was a little surprised since this was baby number 2 for her, but C-sections are brutal. Of course I said yes. They don't live far from us, so it wouldn't be a hassle to bring the kids over from time to time, and if I'm honest, I always love extra days with Louisa and Ted. Meanwhile, my own wedding is coming up this February. Luke and I have been planning an epic, 3-week honeymoon, a lifelong dream for both of us. Maybe that sounds excessive, but it's something neither of us would want to attempt with kids, and the timing seemed perfect. The plan is after our wedding on a Saturday, my custody week, the kids would stay with Greg for that night and the entirety of his week, then he'd keep them for my following week and his next, all in, 3 weeks and a day. I don't have local family to call in for help. My parents both passed away young, as did my grandparents, and the aunt and uncle who took me and retired all the way out in New Mexico. My friends have babysat here and there, but with our smooth co-parenting history, I felt completely comfortable asking Greg to keep the kids for this window since I've done the same many times when he needed it. I texted Greg the general idea, then emailed a detailed itinerary, where we'd be, how to contact me, all emergency contacts, just so he'd feel prepared. I waited, thinking there'd be some minor questions, but a few days later I received what Luke and I now jokingly headline the manifesto. It was a barrage, paragraph after paragraph, parts of it clearly copied from an AI, all anxiety and indignation. Essentially, Greg and Tessie demanded to know what kind of mother abandons her children for a 3-week vacation. They painted me as a heartless co-parent, dumping young mother Tessie with 2 stepkids while I get to gallivant around the globe. By the way, I don't think I've ever actually gallivanted in my life. They insisted that choosing not to have more children with Luke doesn't mean we can just offload Louisa and Ted on them whenever we please. In conclusion, they closed with a warning. It is absolutely our responsibility to handle our own custody weeks, and this wasn't some life or death scenario justifying my request. After reading their email, I couldn't help myself. I got a little petty. I rifled through 4 years of text exchanges and crafted an embarrassingly detailed spreadsheet, noting every occasion either of us had asked for a schedule switch, how many nights covered, how often, all of it. Turns out, Greg and Tessie have asked me for 87 nights, over 52 times, compared to my 12 nights, 8 times. Of course that makes sense, they have a young child and another on the way, but it was validating to see I wasn't making unfair asks. Friends urged me to retaliate, to tell Greg that if my request is too much then I won't help during their baby's first months, but I couldn't do that. I genuinely enjoy extra time with my kids. Still, it stung to have my contributions ignored. For context, I pick the kids up after school every single day, sometimes with Luke's help. On Greg's custody weeks, I drop them off at his house so Tessie doesn't have to wrangle their baby for pickup, even though she doesn't work now. Our divorce agreement states each parent should do drop-off after their respective week, but I've taken up all drop-offs and pickups for quite a while, mostly to make life easier since their new baby. It's just a 5-minute drive, or a nice 20-minute walk with the kids. I also handle every doctor and dentist appointment, every school meeting, since my schedule is flexible and Greg would need to take PTO. Health insurance is split by the agreement, the kids are on his employer's plan, but since I take them to appointments, I pay all the co-pays. I've even started covering Louisa's increased expenses from her type 1 diabetes since it came up that Greg's been struggling to keep up financially. It's not breaking my bank, and I'd rather handle it quietly than disrupt Louisa's care. Even with their younger son, who is in the process of being diagnosed with autism and has some tough meltdowns, I get frequent calls to come get Louisa and Ted when things get overwhelming at their house. Of course, I always say yes, and often have to cancel my own plans, but I do it because I love my children and want to help Greg and Tessie. And yet, when I finally ask for a little flexibility, suddenly I'm the bad guy. I keep going over everything in my head, and despite how much it hurt, I know I'd make the same choices again. Because my kids always come first, whether Greg and Tessie see it or not. Greg was in an accident a while back, and since then, he's been driving my old car. I had bought a new one and hadn't gotten around to selling the old one. It's not really worth much anyway. For the past 7 months, Greg has made zero effort to replace it, just continues using it as if it's his. Greg travels sometimes for work, and there's a cat at their house that the kids love. Normally, Louisa would take care of the litter box when Greg was away, but everything changed after her diagnosis. Until we get her health under control and the doctors give us some clear answers, we both agreed that neither of us wants her anywhere near that litter box. Luckily, they let the cat outside during the day, but someone still has to tackle the mess inside. Then there's Tessie. Ever since she got pregnant, she's flat out refused to deal with the litter box, saying she shouldn't have to. Ted, the youngest, is just too little. He tried once, failed spectacularly, so now he helps, which is more adorable than it is useful. So guess who's been left taking care of the litter box? Me. None of this bothered me too much at first, but as these little things have piled up, my car, the litter box, their constant lack of consideration, I've realized I need to draw a line. All these little benefits and favors I've been giving them? The free use of my car, looking after their cat, and so on, they're over. The only promise I plan on keeping is to watch the kids after Tessie has her C-section. That's it. What really gets me is the sheer nerve of them, refusing to do the one thing I specifically asked, the one thing I've always stepped up to do for them. A lot of my friends think I'm not being stern enough, while others warn that this could damage our co-parenting relationship and, in turn, hurt the kids. Honestly, that's the only thing stopping me from just slamming all the doors closed. If it weren't for the kids, I wouldn't hesitate for a second. Update 1. One thing I never mentioned before is that Greg and I have a history that's as long as my memory. I moved to his mom's neighborhood when I was 4. He'd always been around, just this unwavering presence from my childhood through to adulthood. We started as friends, and that friendship eventually turned into something more when I was in college. That's when I got pregnant. To his credit, he stepped right up, he married me, supported me and our growing family, paid all of our bills, and even covered my college tuition. Looking back, he was always the good guy, always dependable, and certainly my friend. People might think I was being taken advantage of, but honestly, for a long time, folks probably thought it was the reverse, that somehow I was the one taking advantage before things really took off for me financially. In the end, I was the one who filed for divorce. Greg offered to get therapy, to find a way to make things work, but I couldn't, in good conscience, ask him to bend himself into something he wasn't. After the divorce, while I was setting up my new home, before Luke and I got together, he was there for me. He mowed my lawn, cleaned my gutters, fixed appliances. It wasn't just one-sided, there were ways he stepped up, and I always saw that. Things have shifted since, obviously, but there was a time when I could do things for him, for them, and their gratitude made it worthwhile. But since the manifesto email, let's just say the air shifted. Helping them, at least the way it used to make me feel, is over. We are living in what I call the post-manifesto era, and nothing about it inspires any joy, certainly not when it comes to doing them favors. I know, I can't keep bending over backwards just because Greg was good to me before. That's not how this works. After spiraling in my own frustration over the manifesto, the absolute nerve of Tessie sending that email, I was about to fire back a response, all hyped up, when Greg called. Still on edge, I picked up. He started with an apology and, though he never specifically said it, the subtext was clear. Tessie fired off that manifesto out of sheer overwhelm. Between his son's issues and Louisa's struggle with getting her type 1 diabetes under control, life's a mess over there. Other type 1 parents know the drill. His wife had misunderstood my email, which admittedly could have been read as asking them to keep the kids for 3 of my custody periods, or 6 weeks, definitely, not what I meant. He reassured me, a week for my honeymoon was totally fine, and they'd figure it out. He admitted the email was totally uncalled for. I didn't sugarcoat my reaction, I told him straight up, it was deranged and dishonest, one of the wildest things I'd ever read. I asked if, reading that email in the cold light of day, anything in there felt remotely true to him, and he conceded it didn't. I'd been swinging back and forth on how to handle this. I really considered saying to hell with it and never switching custody again, regardless of how many C-sections Tessie had. But I dialed it back. I told him, I'll take the kids when Tessie has her C-section, keep them for my custody week, and then hand them back to him. They'll still get their 10 days to recover. If they need additional help afterward, he's going to have to figure out extra childcare, just like he will for his other son. Greg tried to argue, but I bulldozed forward. All those times I watched the kids during my custody to help him? That goodwill would be cashed in for my honeymoon week. He thanked me, agreed it was fair. But I made it crystal clear, after that email, every extra thing I'd been doing was discontinued, effective immediately. Either he finds a new carpool, no bus, since it's private school, or, if I keep schlepping the kids home, then he or Tessie comes to pick them up each week during their custody. And if they can't care for the children because of their son's meltdowns or the new baby, I'd help, but now, because of those accusations, I'd start explicitly tracking every request and, if I thought it was becoming a pattern, I wouldn't hesitate to file for primary custody. I told Greg, if he wanted, he could have the kids every other weekend and I wouldn't demand child support, given his difficult situation, and we both know I could. He insisted that wasn't necessary, he'd figure it out. He apologized again and didn't have much to say. I explained that trust could be rebuilt, if at all, but only with a lot of effort on his and Tessie's part. I was done pouring myself into this to be repaid with a tax. He assured me he understood. And since this was a verbal, aka non-binding, agreement, I told him, the next time I got even a sniff of demands or accusations like that email, I'd go nuclear, lawyer already on retainer. Technically I hadn't met the lawyer yet, but sometimes you've just got to bluff. Greg confirmed he got it. Tessie texted an apology afterward, and while it sounded sincere enough, I don't trust her. Greg wouldn't throw her under the bus, but the sheer fact she felt comfortable sending such a demonizing email after everything I've done means I have zero grace left to give her. I sent her a brief acknowledgement and moved on with my day. Their lives are about to get a lot harder, and if they try putting that strain or those difficulties onto my kids, I'll act immediately. Still, if my children get a little less at their dads than they do here, I can live with it. It's not the worst lesson. Their needs will always be met, and they've been in therapy for a while now. I worry about Tessie's potential to lash out, but I know my kids would tell me if things get out of hand. A couple quick things. About the car, it was promised to my friend's stepdaughter for when she gets her permit. She's 15 and, like many that age, isn't exactly bursting with motivation. I was telling my friend all about this, and her husband immediately went and told their daughter to get ready for her permit test. She failed, as many do, but she's trying again next week and he'll be buying the car then. Greg knows this and also knows his deadline. And the cat? Not Tessie's, it was one of Greg's classic guilty divorced dad first Christmas gifts. I like the cat, a sweet, snuggly thing, and I haven't minded helping with her, especially since Louisa does feel bad she can't do it anymore. Honestly, if not for that, I probably wouldn't have agreed. Fortunately, the induction is coming up soon. And Greg won't be traveling for a while, so it's kind of a moot point now. Obviously, if they ever decide to try for a baby again, they'll have to find someone else to handle the litter box from now on. I've probably only scooped it 3 times, but looking back, I realized that was crossing some boundaries I should have established in the first place. Update 2. So much has happened since my last update that I honestly don't even know where to start. The induction was scheduled for last Tuesday, and I had everything planned out perfectly, or so I thought. I picked up Louisa and Ted on Monday evening as agreed, fully prepared for what I assumed would be a straightforward few days while Tessie recovered from her C-section. Tuesday morning, I got a text from Greg around 6 a.m. Tessie's in labor, heading to hospital now. Thank you for everything. Standard stuff. I wished them luck and went about my day with the kids, school drop-off, Louisa's endocrinologist appointment. Her numbers have been all over the place lately, picking up Ted early for a dentist cleaning. Normal Tuesday chaos. But then Wednesday rolled around, and silence. Not a single word from either of them. No babies here. Text, no photos, nothing. I figured maybe things got complicated. Second babies can be unpredictable, even with planned C-sections. I didn't want to bother them during what could be a stressful time, so I waited. Thursday morning, still nothing. Now I was genuinely worried. I texted Greg, hey, just checking in, hope everything went smoothly with the delivery. Kids are doing great here. Hours passed. No response. Friday afternoon, I was starting to panic. This wasn't like Greg at all, even during his most overwhelmed moments, he's always been communicative about the kids. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. Called the hospital, they wouldn't tell me anything since I'm not family. I even tried Tessie's number, which I rarely use. Also straight to voicemail. The kids started asking questions I couldn't answer. When are we going to meet the baby? Is daddy okay? Why hasn't he called us? I found myself making excuses, telling them everyone was probably just tired and adjusting. But internally, I was spiraling. Had something gone wrong with the delivery? Was Tessie okay? Was the baby okay? Saturday morning, I was seriously considering calling the police for a wellness check when my phone finally rang. It was Greg, but he sounded off, exhausted, yes, but also evasive in a way that immediately put me on edge. Claire, I'm so sorry I haven't called. It's been a lot. Greg, what happened? Is everyone okay? The kids have been asking. Everyone's fine. The baby's fine. Tessie's fine. We're all fine. Except nothing about his voice suggested fine. There were long pauses, and I could hear what sounded like hushed arguing in the background. When can I bring the kids to meet their brother? I asked. Another pause. Actually, that's what I'm calling about. We need to extend this a bit longer. My stomach dropped. Extend what? Having the kids stay with you. Just for another week or two. Maybe 3. I felt that familiar anger starting to bubble up. Greg, we agreed on 10 days. It's been almost a week already, and you haven't even. I know. But Tessie's having a really hard time adjusting. Harder than expected. And with everything going on with my son's diagnosis stuff, and the new baby, we just need more time. There it was again, that tone from the manifesto era. The assumption that I'd just accommodate whatever they needed, whenever they needed it. Greg, no. We had an agreement. The kids miss you, they want to meet their brother, and frankly, I have my own life to manage. Luke and I have plans this weekend. Claire, please. His voice cracked slightly. I'm asking as a friend. Not as. I'm just asking. Something in his tone stopped me cold. This wasn't the entitled demand from before. This was desperation. What aren't you telling me? I asked quietly. Long silence. Then, can we meet somewhere to talk? Just you and me. Without the kids. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop Sunday morning. Luke offered to watch Louisa and Ted, though I could see the concern in his eyes. This whole situation was starting to affect our household too. When I saw Greg walk into the coffee shop, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from me and immediately put his head in his hands. The baby isn't mine. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. What? The baby? He's not. I'm not his biological father. The coffee shop suddenly felt incredibly loud. I could hear every conversation, every espresso machine, every chair scraping against the floor. How do you know? He came out looking nothing like me, nothing like any of us. And Tessie? He lifted his head, and I saw tears in his eyes. She broke down and admitted it. There was someone else. Someone from her work. I felt like I was watching someone else's life implode in slow motion. Greg, I'm so sorry. She says it was just once. Says she was overwhelmed with everything, my son's issues, the pregnancy, feeling like I was always dealing with kid stuff from you and. He stopped himself. That's not fair. This isn't about you or our kids. When did you find out? Thursday. We'd been home for 2 days, and I kept thinking something felt off. Finally asked her outright. She confessed everything. No wonder there had been radio silence. They weren't adjusting to a new baby, their entire world was falling apart. What are you going to do? I don't know. Tessie wants to work it out. Says the other guy doesn't even know, doesn't want anything to do with raising the baby. She's begging me to stay, to raise him as mine. And what do you want? He was quiet for a long time. I keep thinking about when Louisa and Ted were babies. How clear everything felt, even when it was hard. This feels like living in someone else's life. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I spoke up. What do you need from me? For the kids, I mean. I need time to figure this out. If you can keep them for another week, maybe 2, while I decide what I'm doing, I'll owe you everything. Despite everything, the manifesto, the boundary stomping, all of it, I found myself nodding. Because at the end of the day, Greg's still the father of my children, and they love him. If their dad's world is imploding, the least I can do is keep their world stable. Okay. But Greg? Whatever you decide, Louisa and Ted come first. They don't deserve to get caught in the middle of this mess. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I know, that's why I'm asking you to keep them right now. They shouldn't have to see me like this. As I watched him walk back to his car, I realized that for the first time in months, I wasn't angry with him. Just incredibly sad for what our blended family was about to go through. I still have no idea how I'm going to explain this to Luke, let alone figure out what it means for my upcoming wedding. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today, I just need to focus on my kids and hope their dad can find his way through this nightmare. Update 3. I thought I'd seen enough chaos for one lifetime, but apparently the universe had other plans. It's been 3 weeks since Greg told me about the baby, and somehow things have gotten exponentially more complicated. First, the immediate fallout. Luke was incredibly understanding when I explained why the kids would be staying longer. He even helped me rearrange our wedding timeline. We pushed the ceremony back 2 months to give Greg time to sort his life out. I was terrified he'd be frustrated, but he just held me and said, "Your kids need stability right now. Everything else can wait." God, I love that man. Louisa and Ted have been asking more pointed questions about why they haven't met their baby brother yet. I've been deflecting with vague answers about Tessie needing extra recovery time, but Louisa's getting suspicious. She's always been perceptive, and at 9, she's old enough to sense when adults are lying. Yesterday she asked, "Mom, is Dad getting divorced again?" The question hit me like a truck. But here's where things get truly bizarre. Last Thursday, I was at the grocery store with both kids when I ran into someone I didn't expect, Marcus, Tessie's coworker. I'd met him exactly once, at a company barbecue Greg had dragged us to about a year ago. Tall, dark hair, one of those guys who tries too hard to be charming. He recognized me immediately. "Claire. How are Greg and Tessie doing with the new baby?" he asked, all smiles. The kids were right there, so I kept it vague. They're adjusting well, thanks. But something in his expression shifted. It's wild how much the little guy looks like. He paused, glanced at Louisa and Ted, then continued, like his mom's side of the family. My blood went cold. This wasn't casual conversation, he knew. The way he said it, the deliberate pause, the slight smirk. He absolutely knew that baby was his. After we parted ways, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Tessie had told Greg that the father didn't know, didn't want to be involved. But Marcus's reaction suggested otherwise. Either she lied to Greg about that too, or Marcus figured it out on his own. That night, after the kids went to bed, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called Greg. Did Tessie tell you the father's name? I asked without preamble. Claire, I don't want to, Greg, I ran into Marcus today. Tessie's co-worker Marcus. He knows. Silence. Then, how do you know he knows? I told him about the encounter, the way Marcus had acted. Greg went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. She told me he didn't know, he finally said. She swore he didn't know and didn't want to know. Well, either she lied, or he figured it out. Either way, this isn't going away. 2 days later, Greg called again. His voice was different, harder, more resolved. Marcus contacted me, he said. He wants to meet. Apparently, Marcus had gotten Greg's number from someone at Tessie's work and left a voicemail. He claimed he'd just learned about the baby and wanted to discuss the situation like adults. Greg was torn between wanting answers and wanting to pretend none of this was happening. What did Tessie say when you told her? I asked. She had a complete meltdown, started screaming that I was ruining everything, that Marcus was going to try to take the baby away from her. Then she locked herself in the bedroom with the baby and wouldn't come out. The meeting happened yesterday. Greg asked if I could keep the kids another few days, just until he figured out what Marcus actually wanted. I agreed, but honestly, I'm starting to feel like I'm enabling this whole mess by being too accommodating. According to Greg, Marcus didn't want to take the baby away, he wanted to be involved. He'd apparently been suspicious about the timing and did his own math after the baby was born. When he confronted Tessie at work, she broke down and confirmed his suspicions. Here's the kicker, Marcus is married too. Has a wife and 2 teenage daughters. His marriage is already on thin ice because of the affair, and now this. He told Greg he feels responsible for the baby but doesn't want to destroy 2 families in the process. They apparently worked out some kind of arrangement where Marcus would quietly provide financial support, but Greg would raise the baby as his own. No legal acknowledgement, no official custody, just money changing hands and everyone pretending the baby belongs to Greg and Tessie. When Greg told me this over the phone, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. That's insane, Greg, you can't build a life on a lie that big. What happens when the baby gets older and starts asking questions? What happens if Marcus changes his mind? What happens if his wife finds out and decides to cause problems? I don't know, he said, sounding defeated. But Tessie says if I don't agree to this, she'll take both boys and move back to her mother's in Oregon. I'd lose my son. His son. Not their son, his son, the one who actually is his biological child, who's dealing with autism diagnosis and needs stability. Tessie was essentially holding him hostage to force Greg into raising another man's baby. Greg, that's emotional blackmail. I know. But what choice do I have? My son needs me. I've been thinking about this nonstop since that conversation. Part of me wants to shake Greg and tell him to lawyer up, demand proper custody arrangements, and stop letting Tessie manipulate him, but another part of me understands his impossible position. Meanwhile, Louisa came to me yesterday with something that made my stomach drop. Mom, she said quietly, at school, Emma's parents are getting divorced, and she said her mom told her that sometimes daddies have to take care of babies that aren't really theirs. I stared at her, wondering how much she'd picked up from overheard phone conversations or just sensing the tension in our house. What made you think about that, sweetheart? She shrugged, but her eyes were too knowing for a 9-year-old. I just wondered if that's why we can't see daddy right now. If he has to take care of a baby that isn't really ours. I'm running out of ways to protect my kids from this mess. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if Greg's situation is going to explode in ways that affect all of us. Because if this arrangement with Marcus falls apart, if Tessie follows through on her threats, if any of this comes out publicly, Louisa and Ted could lose their father entirely. And there's not a damn thing I can do to stop it. Luke found me crying in the kitchen last night and asked what I needed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have an answer.